make a difference. Inspire people to think, to reflect. Personal development is exactly that. It's personal development. No one needs to tell you what to do to become better, or being a scientist, or being a leader, or a teacher, or whatever. But you need to be inspired doing something for yourself, but you're also doing something for society as well. Making a difference to people around you, maybe by supporting them socially, professionally. You can make a difference in so many different ways. Most of the Nobel Prizes are given to reward off-the-wall thoughts which are developed into fantastic successes. If you just keep your head down and think about yourself, then the only person who'll make a difference to is yourself. My advice would be...
Hello, Bob. Thank you so much for being here with us today on Chung Huong Institute podcast. Bob, you have done so much work calling in from Sweden right now. You also have a sub-personality, which I adore completely, Mad Bob. Can you tell us a little about you and a little bit about Mad Bob?
Okay, well, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm an Englishman that's been living in Sweden for 30 years, so over half of my life. I trained in the UK, biology first, and then a PhD in parasitology, and then moved here in 1994. So, and then I've gone through the academic ranks here. I moved here as a postdoc, associate professor, and I'm also now Dean of Doctoral Education at Karolinska as well. But just the most amazing transformation was since last August, when I learned about digital presence and started to use LinkedIn. I've had a LinkedIn account for a long time. It's the only sort of social media which I've ever used. I think I'm the only person in my generation never to have used Facebook, or also never really been interested. But then I actually learned about the potential reach that you have. And as an academic, a senior academic, and I have quite a global reputation, and I suddenly realized I had an audience there. So I decided I'd start the post. And then I was thinking, how am I going to capture people's imagination? So I came up with Mad Bob, and of course people think the MAD means crazy. And working in the field of neuroscience, that would be a simple assumption to make, but it's not. The MAD, it means make a difference, because I'm very much into developing talent, helping people in their professional development. So the Mad Bob becomes make a difference Bob, not a crazy Bob.
Yeah, I love that. I saw you on LinkedIn, and I saw Mad Bob. I think, oh, do we have a mad scientist? And I look you up, and I see make a difference. I feel so inspired.
Well, that's always what I try and do. It's the one word I look for in evaluations of teaching, or indeed when I'm presenting science, if I've been inspiring, because you want to inspire people to think, to reflect, and personal development is exactly that. It's personal development. No one needs to tell you what to do to become better, or being a scientist, or being a leader, or a teacher, whatever. But you need to be inspired to go through those thought processes. So that's what I like to do. And it's really nice to see on LinkedIn that lots of people are starting to use the MAD concept. Start to see it being used in lots of other posts, and it's become quite normal for people to say, I want to make a difference. So if I'm a trendsetter, then I'm quite nice. There's some achievement to be made as a 59-year-old man.
Yes, and what's a MAD PhD student? How do we become that?
Well, I think one will become that by just adopting that concept that you're doing something for yourself, but you're also doing something for society as well. Making a difference to people around you, maybe by supporting them socially, professionally. You can make a difference in so many different ways. But if you just keep your head down and think about yourself, then the only person you'll make a difference to is yourself. Which is enough for some people. But I think that I'd like to think that the MAD concept is more about what we can do, especially in our working environments, which are quite challenging in the academic world and in research world. So hopefully people will understand that it's not only for yourself, but it's for the people around you. You can make a difference in lots of different ways.
Yeah, it seems very common. People go into programs either as students or professors or workers, right? And they go in, check the boxes, go out.
No, I mean, that's the minimum that you're expected to do. So that's okay. And some people, will be lone wolves and want to do it that way, which is fine, because we should be able to cater to everyone's needs and wishes. But I think that I find that the academic world is not caring enough And I think that we need to care more. As the universities, and I'm part of the senior leadership at Karolinska Institutet, that I'm very interested in us caring about the people when they're at the Karolinska. We want people to have a good time, a good experience, and to speak nicely about their experience at Karolinska, because that would be a way of attracting more people. But I think that so I think that that's really, that's really the essence, that we should all think about those things and how we can help other people then have a good experience as well. We need to care about each other. If we see somebody being badly treated, we need to speak up. This is one of the things I talk a lot about on LinkedIn, taking your professional responsibility, not just to yourself, but for your working environment. We have lots of the pressures in the academic world, especially in the research world, and just increasing crazily. So it's a lot of people feeling that pressure, and maybe that makes them behave in not so perfect ways sometimes. But we need to have a zero tolerance about bad behavior in professional settings, whether you're in academic world or whether you're working in a bank or wherever in society. And we need to have the culture that you speak up and you allow people to give feedback to people in order to help them to become better. So I think that that's very important, and that's really caring about your colleagues and in your own working environment. So I think that's what we need to promote a lot more.
How do you change the culture, Bob? I mean, Sweden is very lovely, I know, and kind as it is generally, but when things get tough, when there is the subtle aggression, what do you do?
You can only do what you can do yourself. I'm a fond proponent of Alfred Adler's philosophy, and if I've understood his teachings correctly, then he talks about what is your task and what are other people's tasks, and you should never really get into someone else's tasks. But one of the tasks that you have yourself is to give people feedback, constructive professional feedback, both positive and negative. And that's then a gift that you give to somebody, which if they accept it and if they reflect and think about it, it might then become a task for them, but you never tell anyone else what to do. So I can't change the culture in academia, but I can try and inspire people to think about how they individually can make a difference in modifying the prevailing culture. And I think that that's all one can do. So for me, moving from the UK to Sweden was a big cultural difference. I arrived as a very young postdoc, and as a classic Englishman, I was very loud, considered to be quite aggressive. I'm quite a big physically, so I can be quite intimidating. And in the UK, when you're upset with people, you shout at them, you scream, you have a tantrum, you slam the door, you walk away, you call off, you come back, and then you just get on with your work because it's over and done with. That incident was gone. It didn't really work that way in Sweden, and the people I screamed at all those 30 years ago, I'm not sure they still talk to me today. So I think one needs to understand the sort of cultural differences and embrace those things, and you need to adapt to them. So the academic culture in Sweden is different from the academic culture in the UK, but there are lots of similarities and down into the sort of the foundations of what happens. So I think the only thing we can do is, and it's up for each of us to make our own decision about, depending on our conscience, about what we think is important. And one of my things is I think it's important to talk about culture in academia. I'm actually going to start my own podcast called the CIA Talks. So that's culture in academia. Because I think there are lots of things we don't talk about. We don't have forums for them. And these type of podcasts is a great way to actually have those conversations. And I think that we need to always be thinking about how can we do better. So I think that we all have a duty to do that. But some people will see that as a duty, and some people not. I'm one that wants to do it. So I'm happy if anyone wants to listen to what I have to say, and if that inspires them to also do something, then great, I've had an impact. And if not, then I'm doing my own task according to Atlas. So I'm happy in that.
I love that, and I cannot wait for CIA podcast to come out now.
Well, you'll be one of my first guests.
Thank you so much. Bob, I really appreciate this vulnerability you just portrayed, which is very rare in academia, to be open enough and daring enough to say, yeah, I slept. Yeah,
Why should academia be different for, we're normal people? So why should it be that you should never show your weaknesses and things? I think this is a common failing of the human race generally. There's nothing wrong with shedding a tear. It doesn't make you any less of a man. I'm 1 meter 87 tall. I'm like 95 kilos, and I'm got quite a lot of muscles. But if I want to cry at a romantic movie, I'll do that without like thinking that it changes my image of my own masculinity. And I think this vulnerability is something that we don't talk about at all. And the question is, well, are you really making yourself vulnerable, or is it really a question about honesty? Why aren't we more honest? And be accepting that everyone has different views. We should embrace that. I mean, the diversity is the coolest thing about international cultures such as we have in the academic world.
I agree with you on that completely. I'm curious, this kind of lack of vulnerability, these masks we all put on, how does this actually connect to neuroinflammation? I mean, I have a theory that neuroinflammation is due a lot to stress.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I mean, there are different parts. If we come to neuroscience, there are different parts. There's cognitive things, mental health, and then there are the sort of the physical, immunological processes that cause disease as well. But I think there are very much variations on a theme. And I think that, we when we're kids at school, maybe we get the chance to be in a play. We do acting, and I think that many of us struggle with different types of things in our personalities. Many of us have ADD traits, maybe not a diagnosis, but behaviors vary as they should do. But many people are ashamed of aspects of their personalities that they might consider as a sign of weakness. And I think that we should talk about these things. And I think that you learn to have the master in order to protect yourself from what you assume people are going to be thinking about you. And I think this is the fundamental. So going back to your question, I tend to rabble, so I apologize for that. I'll get there in the end. But if it be a neuroinflammatory process that's causing a disease, or whether it be a state of mental health or perceptions of how you're being perceived in your working environment, which affects your feelings of yourself, it all comes down to the same thing, which is you need to be healthy in yourself. You need to be living a healthy life. I think healthy aging is all about healthy living, first and foremostly. But if you understand who you are, that you're mentally accepting who you are, good, bad, and ugly parts of you, then that will actually help you because you'll be less stressed. Because I think stress comes from unfulfilled expectations, and we tend to have a lot higher expectations of ourselves than maybe we should do, especially in the academic world, that everyone should be so successful and so on. So I think these are very much related. And if you don't have a good mental health, mental health is not wellness. Let's call it wellness, because it's our mindfulness, because there's much better terms. Mental health always sounds so dramatic. But if you don't understand well-being and mindfulness, and you don't really understand who you are as a person, the chances are that this will affect your moods, which will affect your hormones, which will affect your immunological process. And when this is part of some, at least, of neurological disease processes. So I think that's how it's related. So if we could teach people to actually be happy with themselves, then I'm sure we'd see a lot less neurological diseases in the future.
How do you define mindfulness, Bob?
Very good. That's a question I thought about a lot. I read a lot modern philosophers as well as old philosophers as well. I think mindfulness, for me, is knowing who you are enough to understand how you react in different situations. It's quite okay to become frustrated or even angry if you want to, but it's not okay to lose control. So if you're mindful of yourself, you can be mindful of your behavior at any one time, because you understand yourself, and you understand the triggers maybe that trigger you in certain situations. I used to get very frustrated in my roles in the leadership at Karolinska, thinking I have all these lovely ideas of things I want to do. I'm very creative. I like to think I'm a creative person and lots of visions about what we could do, but many of them are sort of really impossible to do, or they're not backed up by the laws or whatever. And I used to get very frustrated thinking, well, I've got all these great ideas and why aren't they coming to fruition? But adopting Adler's philosophy of like, my task is to come up with the ideas and I present them, and then it's someone else's task to decide, well, should we do this or not? Then, my job is done. And this has helped my mindfulness in understanding what my role is. I think many of us are not mindful of where the limits of our responsibilities lie. So for me, that's one part of mindfulness. And the other is actually knowing yourself enough to understand how you're going to react in certain situations, and to be able to then maybe not take it to a dagger to the heart when one of the students replying to your questionnaire about your teaching says, yeah, you were poor. There's always one person in the class that says you're poor. There could be 99 that think you were brilliant. And for years, that one person used to irritate me, because I was thinking, why did this one person not think I was as great as everyone else did? Now I don't think about it. So I think mindfulness is understanding yourself enough to accept your strengths and as well as your weaknesses, and to be content with that, and just saying, that's the way I am. It's not to say that you should work on those things and try and improve them, but it's an acceptance. And I think if you accept the way you are, whether it means you accept you're a psychopath, whether it means that you're a drama queen who's going to burst into tears every 5 minutes, it doesn't matter. As long as you accept it yourself, then you're mindful.
Right, because if you accept it, then it changes by itself, doesn't it?
Exactly. Would you agree with that, or do you have another view?
No, I love that, because I think in the West, we oftentimes, at least here in the United States, we oftentimes hear mindfulness as a self-help tool. Now, my view is like very the traditional Buddhist view, being a nun in that way, but your view, the way you shared it, it just feels so, to me at this moment, it feels so integrative, right? Feelings, emotions, sensations, perceptions. Okay, here it is. Be with that, but don't cling to it. Don't attach to it. Don't say, this is me. That's what I hear.
Yeah, I actually, this is me is something I do. There's, I love musicals. There you go. There's a secret out there. I love musicals. I can't sing or dance myself, but I love watching other people doing it. And The Greatest Showman, I have this lovely song, This Is Me, where the bearded lady and the rest of the entourage of Barnum's so-called freaks are singing, This Is Me. I'm not accepted by society, but this is me, and I'm proud. And I usually play that clip of the film as an introduction whenever I start a new role as leading a group, a committee or something, as a way of an introduction, and saying, I'm me, I'm English, I've been living here for 30 years, so I'm not a Swede, and I'm going to behave like this, and that's what you can expect. This is me. Yeah. I think if more of us adopted that and again, without the shame of thinking that you're not enough. And I think that's very much what I see in the younger generation. Of course, when I was younger, I was just the same. It's only sort of I had my epiphany a few years ago as a late middle-aged man. But I think this is something that we should teach the younger generations as soon as possible, to value yourself, to see your own worth, and to understand that it's enough if you like yourself. I'm sure that would have a major difference in how sick people wouldn't become.
How do you do that with academia? I mean, you're teaching a topic that within neuroscience, that's such a difficult topic, and many people end up with panic, anxiety, low self-esteem. I can't do this. I'm not good enough to learn this. How do you empower them?
Empowering is a lovely word. I'm glad you use that, because that's what it's all about. It's not telling people what to do, but it's giving them the skill sets, the information, the training in how to reflect, so that they can get there by themselves. I remember watching an interview with a guru from India on the impact theory series. And he was asked, how should you raise your children? What should you do to teach them? And he started laughing, and he said, well, you don't do anything. You just, as a parent, you should be there in case they need you, but they have to find their own way. And at the time, I was a new parent myself, and it really struck a chord with me that you can't be telling someone else what to do. You have to let them develop themselves. But so I think that, coming back to your question, we need to give people enough information to educate them in a way of self-reflection and how to do it, to give them the tools for them to be able to make this journey themselves.
And earlier you said such an important word, inspire. Right? Because when we inspire others, then
that's when you have the biggest impact. I mean, if you get somebody to think about something in a different way than you were thinking, and I think this is actually one of the saddest things about research at the moment, that you're not actually, if you come up with alternative ideas, ideas which don't fit the normal understanding, it doesn't fit in with the current thinking, then you're not accepted. The first people to discover regulatory T cells, they worked on these cells for years. They were called suppressor T cells at the time. This is way back in the 80s when I was doing my PhD. And no one really believed in these cells. And then, in later years, they were rediscovered as regulatory T cells. And even the first people working with the regulatory T cells who described them, they didn't get anywhere. And it was only when a big shot from Japan came out with them that everyone suddenly realized, this is a real thing. And I think that, many times I've applied for grant funding for something completely off the wall, completely novel idea, never get funded because people look at it as saying, well, I don't understand this. And instead of saying, isn't that what innovation is? To be able to actually follow something that you don't know. So I think that inspiring self-reflection, inspiring curiosity is really what fundamentally we should do as teachers or parents or just friends or colleagues as well. If we can do that with someone else, that's an amazing impact, because if you get somebody to start to think in a way that they weren't thinking about, you planted that seed in their heads, and that's a fantastic impact.
I have a question for you, Bob. Usually we do this toward the end of the podcast, but since we're on the topic, you have a question from our previous podcast guest.
Okay.
And he asked, do you ever feel like there are questions in your field that are being avoided in favor of safe, fundable, or socially accepted ones? If so, what are some, and can you name at least one neglected frontier that you would take on if funding was not an issue, and if societal norms did not control the field?
I think that applies basically to the whole of the research field. Just as we were sort of in that you don't reward curiosity and innovation. I think there are lots of. So I think if I were trying to be clever here and make some general comment, it would be the neglected things are actually promoting curiosity. We're actually at the moment in science in a fantastic era of the omics revolution. We have fantastic technologies for producing data. We can take patient samples and we can do the genomics, the proteomics, the lipidomics. We get all sorts of information that's telling us what we're doing on a tissue level, on a cellular level, on a nuclear level. We can distinguish with cell populations and things. We're producing so much data, but there's no question there. What is the question we're trying to address? So if we come up with the brain atlas to really show that there are different parts of the brain actually look different and comprise the different types of cells, variations on a theme. It's wonderful to know, but for why? For what reason? Why do we need to know that? It's good reference material, but so what? Is it going to cure Alzheimer's? No. So I think the general comment would be the neglected aspect of research is just to promote this curiosity, innovation, because the reason we don't do that is that it's unsure whether it's going to work. And the system is such that you have to produce, you have to be successful in order to publish papers, in order to get your next grant. So it, sort of going down sort of blind alleys that turn out to be dead ends is not really allowed, or not going to give you a successful career. Within neuroscience itself, then I think that one of the neglected aspects is actually we're scared of the brain, obviously. In other parts of the body, you can go in and take a biopsy without any major risk. But the brain and the central nervous system, it's so incredibly important, and everything is risky. So I think that when it comes to, if we go into sort of immunotherapy and developing medicines for diseases, then the industry has stayed away from brain disease, neurological diseases, because they're so difficult. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it. Instead, just because it's more difficult, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, and just because it's more risky, it doesn't mean we shouldn't do it either. So I think that's where I'm not sure that's a good answer to the question, but I think science should be done because you have an interesting question. Now, belonging to a medical university, we often, when I'm writing grants, we're saying, well, the work that we're doing hopefully will lead to, a cure or therapy for ALS, for Alzheimer's, for glioma brain tumors. That is the hope. But should that really be the sort of the sealing the deal for whether I get funded or not? The potential that this might have, it would take 10 years, 20 years until that would happen. Is that the important thing, or is it just a saying, I have this question that we don't know how microglia can be taught how to behave properly when they're misbehaving in the neurological disease process. I want to do it just as a scientific question. Shouldn't that be enough? So I think those are sort of aspects of funding should reward science for the discovery of new knowledge, and whether that then converts into a therapy or a new biomarker or not, just knowledge. I think we need to get back to that.
Yeah, knowledge that's not stuck in a box of what it should be, and it means no knowledge because it's limited.
Well, I mean, things. When I was a PhD, when I was actually during even my bachelor's degree, I got to do a project, and I got to do some electron microscopy. And at the time, when you did transmission electron microscopy, what you did was you sprayed your sample with gold, and that was used then to provide the images. But it turned out that when they started going over to using platinum instead, which is a lot thinner than gold, that what happened when you were spraying your samples was you were sort of filling in all the cracks. There was so much going on that everything was smooth. So if you look at scanning electron microscopy, not transmission, scanning electron microscopy, everything from the 60s to the 80s, everything is smooth. And then after that, then you got contours and ridges, because you didn't know at the time the technology is only what's right at the time. So then you have to rewrite all the textbooks, because nothing looked the way, ultrastructurally, the way it actually was, because the techniques weren't up to it. And with the new techniques, you have this new lens, you're able to look at things and revise them. So knowledge is always going to be sort of time-based where you are in a technological development. It doesn't mean that you're right, and it doesn't mean that you were wrong when new technologies come along to show that it wasn't actually the case. So we should reward knowledge for what it means now, because that's the context where we're developing it.
A lot of people right now are searching of, where can I fill the gap, right? Where can I find this gap? What would happen if, instead of the search of where's the gap and criticism, we look at where can I build upon knowledge?
Absolutely. And really, as scientists, we stand on the knowledge of everyone that's gone before us, because unless we're coming up with something completely new. My favorite Nobel Prize winner is Julius von Jauregg, who was head of the neuro clinic in Vienna at the turn of the 1900s. And he came up with something. He got the Nobel Prize for fever therapy, whereby he basically took blood from a patient with malaria, There were soldiers coming back from the wars in Africa, and he put that into patients with neurosyphilis, which at the time was an incurable disease that ended up with you being put into a mental asylum. And he realized that whatever the organism was that was causing the disease was sensitive to heat. And so by inducing malarial fever, and after 3 bouts of fever, then you could treat the patient with quinine, which would kill the malaria parasite, so you got rid of it. So transient infection was enough to then stop the course of the neurosyphilis. It didn't cure it, but it stopped the progression. I think this is like an amazing thought. So I used that as an inspiration then to try and say, well, couldn't I use parasites to treat autoimmune diseases? And that was what started my early years. I did as an early postdoc, and actually has led to much of the research which I'm doing now as well. So I think we should always pay homage to the people who've gone before us, because we realize that without their knowledge, then we won't be able to start from where we're starting from, or indeed get our inspiration.
Indeed. So with neuroinflammation and autoimmune diseases, what can people do who have that, who are struggling right now, who, especially, I don't know about Sweden, but in the United States, many people can't afford to see a doctor?
No. Well, it depends on, if you look at medical science generally, we've had some fantastic breakthroughs in the last 2 decades. When I was a kid, childhood forms of leukemia, it was a death sentence. You have ALL, you're dead before you're 10, 12 years old. Now you can treat those kids with CAR T cells, costs you $1 million, but you can treat them. They're cured. They can have a normal life. We have medicines for most metabolic diseases or autoimmune diseases. So if you get in early, rheumatoid arthritis, anti-TNF therapy, multiple sclerosis with B-cell depleting antibodies, then you can, and we have insulin for diabetes, then you're treatable. You can slow down the development of these things. Transplantation surgery, you can do multiple transplantation of huge organs. You can even transplant faces nowadays. So absolutely wonderful. Imaging technologies, you can look inside the body now, especially inside the brain. Medical imaging is just like through the roof now with the resolution of what you can do. So we've had all these fantastic successes. When I was a kid, I was born in 1966. So 1967 was when smallpox was finally eradicated from the world, when they had successful vaccination. And that was sort of the major breakthrough in medical science. And then not a lot has sort of hadn't been really happening. But the last 2 decades, there's so many of these successes, but not for neurological diseases. We have no efficient treatment or cure for Alzheimer's, for Huntington's disease, for Parkinson's, for ALS, for glioma brain tumors. All these things are really, really there. So while there are medicines available, so in Sweden, my clinical colleagues have developed a fantastic protocol. So using a repurposed drug, so the drug that depletes B cells, and that was used then for B cell cancers, melanomas originally, myelomas, and then it was starting to be used in rheumatoid arthritis, and rheumatoid arthritis being an autoimmune disease, multiple sclerosis being an autoimmune disease, and why not try that? Had a fantastic effect. And this then has become and we've been able to titrate down the dose, and the original antibody which was used, which is a half human, half a mouse antibody, is still allowed for use in Sweden. This has had such a major impact on our healthcare. One, it saves the healthcare so much money because this medicine is a lot cheaper than the one that companies want us to use. But the other thing is that if you come in early, then you can actually do something. I have a cousin with MS and living in the UK. She never got a single treatment whatsoever, and she's now fully incapacitated, sitting in a wheelchair for many, many years. So this sort of difference in equity of medicines or treatments globally is really disheartening, because there are efficient medicines or therapeutic principles that could be used for a lot of people, and they're not getting them. So governments need to shape up.
I agree. You mentioned Alzheimer's. So when we look at neurodegeneration, is there a connection with these days? People are having so much brain fog. People cannot think. They cannot remember. Young people, I see 16, 17-year-olds who cannot remember what happened 5 minutes ago.
Wow. Yeah, there could be all sorts of explanations for this. I think that for the younger generations, they tend to have concentration issues. They don't read the way we used to. Provided they gain information in different ways, very much like looking at screens of different types and a constant overload of information. I think that's part of maybe the fogginess. There's a great researcher in Australia. I think his name is Alan Schneider, and he did some fantastic work with autism savants, the people who have exceptional talents. And his hypothesis was that most of us normal human beings, we receive lots of information. So while I'm talking to you now and I'm looking at my computer screen, I can hear the birds singing outside. I can hear a family member walking around in the corridor. I can see sort of what a messy room I have around me. I have so much information coming in. And his idea was that savants actually were able to focus on one thing. And he started to investigate this by injecting drugs into his brain, which would just paralyze part of his brain for small amounts of time. And now he does it with electrodes, and has proved a point that then people could suddenly become a lot better at playing a musical instrument or singing or doing a arithmetic task. So I wonder whether the youngsters now, they get so much information because they're non-stop getting information, especially from their phones. Their brains don't have time to relax, and whether this means then that they're becoming less good at memory, or they don't need memory as well, because you know that information is always going to be available there. When I was a kid, you used to have to go to the library and get a book out, and you knew that the book was there, but you had to go and access it. Now you've got information right on your phone or your iPad or your computer 24/7. So I think that the whole way that we teach, we've gone away from deep learning, where you really have to understand something and repeat it and get it like really understood, because you got to surface learning, because you know you can access that information again. And maybe that's one part of it. But I think generally, the other thing is, I think people have always been forgetful. You know, I'm 59 years old, and I've always been forgetful, especially from 2 minutes to the next. I can completely forget what I'm doing. I walk into a room and I say, why have I come here? So I think this has probably been around in society a lot, but we're just catching it a lot more. So I'm not sure it's necessarily like an epidemic of that. But I see this as sort of traits of ADD, which many of us actually have. And in order to have an ADD diagnosis, you need a certain number of traits in order to get that. And they vary. But I think many of these traits is just normal behavior. And some of us are more forgetful. But I think that what one would need to do to combat this is to be mindful then of the information overload, when we need to have complete breaks from that. When I have guests here that come to visit for dinner or something, I take their mobile phones away from them and leave them in the hallway, because so many people are addicted to this constant need. So I think that what we need to do with our brains in order to improve their function is to give them rest. I also think that with the younger generation, I don't think that sleeping habits are maybe as good as they should be. And sleep is the most important thing that you need for a healthy life, especially a healthy brain. So I think that maybe if we're seeing, people are talking about the epidemic of Alzheimer's, we look at the predictions. And again, is it just because partly because we're better at diagnosing this, or is it actually that it's becoming more common? It's probably both.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's partly also we're overworking ourselves. Like you say, sleep is so important. We're not sleeping. Just day and night work.
No, and if you're stressed, then you don't sleep with the same quality. I actually had a revolution. I listened to Andrew Huberman's podcast. He had a podcast with an English guest talking about sleep. I learned so much, and I've been a bad sleeper for 35 years, and I just changed it now. I'm sleeping like a baby, but I'm getting basically twice the sleep which I used to get for the last 35 years, just by doing some simple changes to my lifestyle and my attitude to the whole sleeping process. And I think that this is part of the mindfulness we talked about earlier, that you're really understanding your body enough to know what you need. Some people need a lot of sleep. Some people say they don't need so much, but there's a physiological process which happens when you're asleep, and the 3 layers of your brain actually separate so that you get a much better flow of cerebrospinal fluid between them. And this is sort of like a wash cycle that you have to have. And it only occurs during the night because it's governed by circadian rhythms. So if you're a night shift worker, you're not getting any benefit of that. And so night shift working for the whole of your life is not probably very, very good for your health. But if we understand these things, then maybe we'll actually do something for our bodies. And I don't think we talked about caring for our colleagues earlier, but we need to care about ourselves as well. And I think that if there's one thing that's neglected, it's actually self-health care.
Yeah. Can you say more about, you said the fluid going through the brain only at night?
The three meters, yeah. So they just move apart structurally, so that the spaces between them, you get a better flow of cerebral spinal fluid. And one of the hypotheses for why this happens is that, you have the brain is one of the two most metabolic organs in your body, the brain and the liver. So they're producing lots, the cells are working really, really hard all the time. So there are lots of byproducts, lots of toxins and things that need to be taken care of. And this is why you need a wash cycle. So this is why sleep is so important, because even though other things happen during sleep, like dreaming and things, which is other things happening, but physiologically, your brain needs to rest. It's a bit like thinking that you have one of these drag races, drag racing cars, they usually go like a couple of 100 meters and that's it. The engines are extremely powerful. Could you imagine trying to drive one of those on Highway 66 from top to bottom? I mean, it wouldn't last. And that's really what your brain is doing every day. It's so highly metabolically active, and you can't do that. You'll have an overheat. And I think that this is probably something that we need to get better at, to understand that, so that it's okay if you do an all night sometime, and when we're young we like to party or whatever you like to do, and you can have days that you don't sleep, but it shouldn't become a habit that you do for years and years. So I think if we had more information about that, people understood that, then you'd be nice to your brain as well as be nice to your heart.
What happens if it becomes a habit?
The chances are then that you're going to stress the organ metabolically. It's never going to get a chance to relax. It's never going to get a chance to recover. And if you don't get a chance to recover, then your behavior changes. You just think about yourself. If you deprive people of sleep, then they start existing all sorts of crazy personalities, and you start behaving completely different. I can remember myself having extreme sleepless nights, and like for long periods of time or days at a time. And I would have done anything. I would have sold my family for $2 if you'd have just said, you're going to get 30 minutes sort of, uninterrupted sleep, because you become so sort of deprived. So if you think what happens at a molecular level, your cells are not recovering, and then this makes them then more prone for things to go wrong. And I think that this potentially is a part of at least some of the neurological conditions that develop over time.
Bob, what do you do to sleep well?
One of the things I had no idea about, and this is why information is so important, we can all learn something, even as older generations. Coffee. A cup of coffee actually stays, the effect of the caffeine or tea stays in your body for 10 to 12 hours. 10 to 12 hours. So I was drinking coffee, at 6 o'clock in the evening. No wonder I wasn't feeling sleepy. I used to go to bed at midnight every night. Now I go to bed at 10:30. I forced myself into this habit. And it's very much sort of having the routines. So I go to bed at 10:30. I don't necessarily fall asleep straight away then. I take a melatonin preparation that helps me actually. It has a deep pro effect. So even if I wake in the middle of the night, which I always do, around 4 o'clock, I can usually get back to sleep now. Before I couldn't. Because as soon as I wake up, my mind starts, going all the things I haven't done and all the stresses, blah, blah, blah. So it's very much that to have healthy routines. So doing the things that, not drinking huge amounts of water before you go to bed, because that's going to make you, need to go to the toilet during the night and things, all these type of things that might affect you. Having it very cold in the bedroom, which I've always wanted to, having it dark, which I always had anyway. So many of these small things that you can do, but it's having a healthy attitude to it. And to teach myself, then I used to work until 11 o'clock in the evening and then trying to relax for an hour when your brain is still up in work and things. Of course, there was no way I could get to sleep because my mind was so still active. So I think that if one understands these things, then you can develop routines which will help you. Some people will read, some people want to watch TV, some people want to drink a cup of coffee before they go to bed, which if you can do it just before you go to sleep, the effect of coffee actually is to make you sleepy before it actually wakes you up, before the caffeine kicks in. But I've never really wanted to do that experiment.
I've heard before that if people drink a whole cup of water before sleep, that they could prevent stroke from happening. Is that true? Or is there more danger because then they have to go to the bathroom many times a night?
I think if it's 1 cup of water, it's not going to make too much of a difference. So I think many of us don't drink enough. Rehydrating is something I actually fight with. I got given a 2-liter water bottle, and the idea is to fill it up in the morning, and by the end of the day, you've drunk the whole 2 liters. I don't often achieve that. I did for a while, but I've become a bit lazy again. But I think that if a lot of us hydrated better during the day, and hydration is important because your body, major component of your body is water. So we really need to fill that up, and many people don't. And certainly if you're dehydrated, your chances of developing headaches and things is increased. So whether it actually would lead to a stroke, not too sure there's evidence to support that, but it can't help actually by hydrating properly and regularly during the day, as opposed to just trying to do something before you go to sleep.
Thank you, Bob. Before we close, Bob, what advice can you give to the next generation of scholars, neuroscientists, or psychologists? What do you want to see happening in the field? Very much needed now.
I think we desperately need a success. When I was talking about all the wonderful things that have happened in medical science, nothing within neurological and neurodegenerative diseases, we need a success to give us hope, to give the patients hope. And I think that will probably come with Huntington's. Huntington's disease is caused by a single gene. And now with CRISPR-Cas, you can actually, hopefully replace that with a good gene, and hopefully that will be a therapy. I think those trials are ongoing around the world at the moment, and I think it would be important to say, I see the neurological neurodegenerative diseases is the last frontier for the reasons I talked about earlier. It's the last place you want to do something with, but now we have so many good medicines and drugs for other parts of the body. It's the only thing left. It's the only market left for the pharmaceutical industry. I'd like to see that I think what we don't do so well within science is actually spread the good practices. Here in Sweden at the Karolinska, we're very good at developing cognitive behavioral therapy. This is amazingly effective for lots of different psychiatric disorders, behavioral situations, and it's so easy now. It can be done through the internet. It can be done. You have self-help on your phones. There are apps that can help people. I'd like to see these things get spread around the world for no cost. I think that very much in science we tend to reinvent the wheel time and time again. I'd like to see a lot more collaboration within neuroscience rather than competition, and it's inherent in the field because that's the way the system is rigged. But I think we need to have a success for neuroscience. Will we crack Alzheimer's? I think that's one of the toughest ones, because I think with any neurodegenerative disease, probably with any disease state anywhere in the body, there's a point of no return. And when the damage has become so excessive, you're probably not going to be able to cure. The question is whether you can even slow it down. But understanding where those checkpoints are, I think that would need a colossal effort and a collaborative effort. So I think that for the young generations, I think first and foremostly, my advice would be follow your intuition. Don't let anybody tell you you've got a crazy idea. I had this crazy idea of treating autoimmune diseases with parasite infections, and no one wanted to listen to me, and we hardly able to publish. We publish in very lowly journals, but someone else did it. They showed that you could take, you can buy eggs over the internet now, Tracheosaurus, if you got inflammatory bowel disease, and you get a pig version of the parasite, which gives you an infection for about a month in your gut, and 50% of the people, they get completely cured. So not so crazy ideas. And let's think about it. Most of the Nobel Prizes were given to reward, off the wall thoughts which are developed into fantastic successes. So I think I'd like to say, follow your heart. Easier said than done, because if the grant reviewers don't understand what you want to do, so you won't get funded. But I think my advice would be, as much as you can, follow your heart, but ask questions, ask the good questions. And maybe we're not asking the right questions now. I think for healthy aging, we need to understand healthy living, because it's too late to think that when you get to 60 years old, you're going to fix yourself. If you've been abusing your body, to some degree during your life, and not been mindful about how good health is, and I'm sure you won't live to a very long age or be so healthy. If you look at the populations of the world where people live the longest, especially in Japan, in Iceland, and I think people have a much better way of living their life.
For healthy aging, you need healthy living. I think I'm going to have to put that on the wall somewhere.
Yeah, and part of that healthy living is then mindfulness. And again, I think if we can, when I was a kid, I never heard the word stress. My father was unemployed for many years, so my parents are stressed out of their heads. But as a kid, you don't really understand that. But we never heard the word stress. But it's a word I hear, daily nowadays by many, many people. So I think we need to get into the right mindset, and part of wellness, whether it be in your mind or in your body, those two things go together. So if we would make smarter choices about what we put in us, how much we exercise, how much we sleep, I'm sure that will help us actually in living nice and lives that might give us the potential to actually have a better old age as well.
Yes. Bob, where can people find you? How can they learn more about your work?
They can find me at the Karolinska Institutet, robert.harris@ki.se. We have a webpage for the lab. Otherwise, you can find me on LinkedIn as Mad Bob.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mad Bob. Bob Harris.
My pleasure.